You're listening to Night Creepypasta Rules, where the rules are never just guidelines. They're survival. Tonight's story follows a psychiatric nurse who takes a job at a crumbling institution, only to discover that beneath the procedures, the patients, and the peeling walls lies something ancient. Listening. This is the Windowless Room. Nursing school teaches you to listen to your patients, to validate their reality, to seek the root of their distress. Ridgeway State Hospital teaches you which truths require a syringe before they fully surface. Stepping through the heavy, buzzing security doors for my first official shift felt like entering a forgotten circle of purgatory. Right here in the rolling, deceptively peaceful hills of rural Ohio, the air itself was different inside. Heavy, institutional, a tired sigh carrying the sharp scent of industrial disinfectant, failing to mask deeper, older smells of unwashed bodies, stale cigarette smoke ingrained in the walls, old plumbing, and something else, a faint underlying metallic tang, like fear itself had a scent. My name is Liam Carter Arn. New hire. Maybe. Fresh meat was more accurate. Judging by the wary, assessing glances from the veteran staff. I came here chasing a ghost. Not a literal one. Not yet anyway. But the ghost of my Uncle David's experience in a place like this years ago. The over-medication, the neglect. The way his spark just extinguished under the weight of institutional indifference. I became a psychiatric nurse to fight that, to be the advocate he never had. Ridgeway, despite its crumbling facade and grim reputation, had an opening, and I needed the work. So here I was, idealism packed away with my civilian clothes, ready to follow procedure. Procedure. That was the mantra. Matron Thorne, head nurse of Ward C, where I was assigned, embodied it. She met me in her severely tidy office, a small island of starched white order amidst the surrounding decay. Her gray hair was pulled back in a ruthlessly tight bun, her uniform immaculate, her eyes the color of washed-out sky, holding no warmth, only a penetrating, assessing sharpness. She laid out my duties, the ward routines, the charting protocols. Her voice crisp, precise, devoid of inflection. And finally, "Nurse Carter," she said, folding her hands precisely on the immaculate blotter. Certain situational protocols specific to Ridgeway, particularly within the older wings like Ward C and its adjacent structures. They are non-negotiable safety measures. She didn't consult a manual. The rules seemed etched into her very being. First, Protocol Alpha 7. Her gaze was direct, unwavering. Should a patient verbally reference the windowless room, regardless of context or perceived lucidity, it signifies acute psychological distress bordering on systemic contagion. You will immediately administer PR and chemical restraint B12. As per formulary, document the trigger phrase precisely, and alert ward security. Do not engage the patient regarding the subject matter. Is that clear? My blood ran cold. Wah. Sedate immediately for mentioning a room. Prevent them from even describing it. What kind of therapeutic practice was that? It felt like silencing a witness, not treating a patient. "Yes, matron," I managed, the words feeling thick, raw. Second, South Stairwell integrity, she continued without pause. It is the primary descent route from Ward C to supplies. Due to historical architectural settling, the perceived number of steps upon descent may occasionally fluctuate. This is a known structural anomaly. For staff safety and equilibrium during descent, maintain visual focus on the destination landing. Under no circumstances are you to vocalize or otherwise acknowledge a perceived discrepancy in the step count. My mind reeled. An extra step? Appearing and disappearing? Don't count it out loud. What happened if you did? The absurdity warred with the chilling, matter-of-fact delivery. Third, floor designation variance. Her voice dropped slightly, taking on an even graver tone. Shifts conclude documentation on the third floor nursing station. If, upon concluding your documented shift time on floor 3, you perceive your location to be floor 4, a currently unutilized administrative overflow wing, standard elevator use is strictly contraindicated due to documented electrical instability during these variances. My skin crawled. You will proceed immediately to the nearest stairwell. Descend directly to the ground floor. Maintain a direct forward gaze and regulate your breathing. Do not blink until you have reached the ground floor lobby and confirmed your location. Her eyes held mine. Do not blink. I swallowed hard, the clinical detachment of the rule making it even more terrifying. Found yourself on the wrong floor? Found yourself on the wrong floor? Walked down multiple flights without blinking? What in God's name? Understood, matron, I whispered. She gave a curt nod. Good. Adherence to procedure ensures safety and stability for all. Dismissed. My first rounds on Ward C felt like walking through a nightmare painted in shades of institutional beige and despair. The air hummed with a low thrum of misery. Distant, indistinct weeping drifted from one locked room. The rhythmic squeak and rattle of an unseen medication cart echoed from down the hall. Heavy footsteps of an orderly pacing somewhere unseen. I passed patient Elias Thorne's room. Same last name as the matron? Coincidence? He sat staring blankly at the wall, catatonic as described in his chart. But as I passed, his head turned slightly, his eyes, startlingly lucid for a brief second, locked onto mine, filled with an intelligent, primal terror, before clouding over again. Did he know I was new? Did he know I now carried the burden of the rules? Later, heading towards the break room, I encountered Frank Kowalski, the older orderly, leaning against the wall, smoking a forbidden cigarette in a recessed doorway. First day swimming with the sharks, newbie? He asked, smoke curling around his cynical smile. Something like that, I admitted. Matron Thorne went over the procedures. Frank chuckled darkly, a sound like rocks tumbling in a dry well. Ah, the procedures. Yeah, listen close to old Evie Thorne on those, kid. Especially Rule 1. Don't get curious about the Windowless Room. Ain't worth it. He winked, then pushed off the wall. Just keep your head down, count the hours. Safest way. As he walked away, the rhythmic jangle and clink of the heavy ring of keys on his belt echoed down the long, empty corridor. I stood there for a moment. The matron's chilling rules, Frank's cynical warning, Elias' terrified gaze swirling in my head. The antiseptic smell couldn't mask the underlying scent of fear. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting long shadows. And from somewhere deep within the asylum's ancient structure, I thought I heard a faint, rhythmic, muffled thump-thump, like something large and heavy patiently bumping against a locked door. Far below, my shift had just begun, and I already felt like I was drowning. The rhythm of Ridgeway settled over me like a shroud in those first weeks. Days blurred into nights, shifts measured by the dispensing of meds, the changing of linens, the charting of observations, often devoid of observable change, and the constant, low hum of institutional existence. The sounds became a familiar, unsettling score, the distant, mournful cry of a patient echoing down a tiled corridor, the squeal and rattle of unseen carts making their rounds, the heavy, echoing finality of steel doors locking, and always, underneath, the building's own sighing breaths, drafts whispering through ill-fitting window frames, the low groan of old pipes in the walls. I tried to hold on to my purpose, the reason I came here. I spent extra time with patients when I could, listening even when the words seemed nonsensical, looking for the person buried beneath the diagnosis, the medication, the crushing weight of this place. Frank, the veteran orderly, watched me with cynical amusement. Bleeding heart, newbie, he grunted one afternoon. catching me talking quietly with a withdrawn woman in the dye room. Gets you nowhere here, just makes it hurt more when they don't get better. Or when they get misplaced. He winked darkly, leaving the final word hanging in the air before shuffling off. The rhythmic clink and scrape of the large keyring secured to his belt fading down the hall. Misplaced. The word echoed, unsettling. My interactions with Matron Thorne remained brief, formal. She observed my work with cool efficiency, offering terse corrections on charting procedure, but never engaging in small talk, her pale eyes missing nothing. I never saw her interact directly with patients, only with staff and paperwork. A stern conductor, orchestrating the ward's grim symphony from her glass-walled office. And then there was Elias Thorne, patient 307, officially diagnosed catatonic schizophrenia, resident for nearly 20 years. Most days, he was exactly as charted, immobile in his chair or bed, staring blankly at a wall, unresponsive. Yet, sometimes, his eyes would clear for a fleeting moment, filled with a startling, intelligent terror that would vanish as quickly as it appeared. That shared last name with the matron felt too specific to be coincidence, but no records indicated a familial relationship. And Frank just shrugged when I asked. Lots of thorns in Ohio, was all he said. It was during evening rounds, the ward settling into its restless nighttime quiet, that Elias had his episode. I was doing final checks, the air thick with the smell of floor wax, and something vaguely like stale urine. As I entered Elias's room, he wasn't staring blankly. He was sitting bolt upright on the edge of his bed, eyes wide, fixed on me with terrifying lucidity. Before I could speak, he lunged, grabbing my forearm with surprising strength. His hand was ice cold, the grip desperate. "Nurse," he rasped, his voice cracked from disuse but vibrating with urgent fear. "You have to listen." They listen. But the room with no windows. My blood ran cold. If a patient mentions the windowless room, sedate them immediately. The phrase hung in the air, charged, forbidden. "Mr. Thorne," I began, trying to keep my voice calm, professional, even as my heart hammered. "What room are you talking at?" "No windows," he hissed, his grip tightening, knuckles white. "Down low, where the walls. Listen. They take the quiet thoughts first. You have to..." His eyes darted frantically around the room, as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. My nursing instinct screamed to engage, explore the delusion, offer reassurance. My memory of Uncle David, dismissed and unheard, urged me to listen. But Matron Thorne's flat voice, the absolute certainty of the protocol, the cold dread coiling in my gut. What happened if I didn't sedate him? What was this? Systemic contagion, she mentioned. He started trembling violently. "It hears us now," he whispered, terror making his voice thin. "Close the door." That decided it. Protocol, safety, containment. My own fear. "Okay, Elias," I said, forcing a calm I didn't feel, gently trying to disengage his grip while reaching for the call button. "Let's just calm down. I'll get Frank." "No, not Frank. He knows." He lets them listen. Elias started to struggle, trying to pull me closer. I hit the call button. "Code Sedate, room 307, I said into the intercom, my voice shaking slightly. "Alpha 7 protocol. Alpha 7 protocol." Within moments, Frank was there, his movements practiced, efficient, devoid of surprise. Together, we administered the piano sedative. Elias fought briefly, a desperate, weak struggle, his eyes fixed on mine, filled with betrayal and terror, whispering, windowless, listening, until the drug took hold, his body going slack, the light in his eyes extinguishing back into blankness. The only sound then was his quiet, even breathing, and the low hum of the corridor lights outside. Frank clapped me on the shoulder as we stepped out, leaving Elias slumped on the bed. "See? Easier," he grunted, wiping his hands on his uniform pants. "Keeps things quiet. Best not to know what they're talking about when they get like that." He walked off down the hall, keys jangling. I stood there for a moment, feeling profoundly sickened. I had silenced him, followed the rule, become part of the system I'd wanted to fight. The guilt was a physical weight. As I turned to leave, my hand brushed against my arm where Elias had gripped me. The skin there felt unnaturally cold, almost numb, even through my uniform sleeve. The chill lingered long after I walked away. Later that night, unable to shake the unease, I found myself tidying Elias's sparse bedside table. An act of penance, perhaps. Tucked beneath his standard-issue plastic water cup was a small, folded square of paper that hadn't been there during my earlier rounds. My fingers trembled slightly as I unfolded it. It wasn't a note. It was a drawing, done in shaky pencil lines. A crude but complex symbol, like a distorted maze or circuit diagram, spiraling inwards towards a single, aggressively blacked out square at its center. No windows. The symbol Elias Thorne drew haunted me. I kept the folded paper hidden, pulling it out in quiet moments, tracing its disturbing non-Euclidean-like geometry. It felt less like a random doodle and more like a map or a warning. Was the blacked-out square the windowless room? Was the spiral the path to it, or away from it? My research attempts intensified, shifting focus. I started searching Ridgeway's digital archives and dusty basement storage for old architectural plans, maintenance logs, anything mentioning structural anomalies or hidden spaces. Predictably, records were incomplete, contradictory. Blueprints from different eras showed inconsistencies, corridors that didn't quite align, rooms labeled storage that seemed too large or oddly placed. The South Stairwell, the one mentioned in Rule 2, appeared on some plans, but was absent or marked differently on others. And any records pertaining to the older condemned wings, particularly the basement levels beneath the original 19th century structure, were either missing, heavily redacted, or required clearance levels far above mine. Frank caught me one afternoon in the basement archive, surrounded by dusty boxes of patient transfer logs from the 1950s. "Looking for ghosts, newbie?" he asked, leaning against a shelf, arms crossed, that cynical smile playing on his lips. "Just trying to understand the building's history, Frank," I said non-committally, quickly closing a ledger that mentioned hydrotherapy incidents. "History's best left buried down here," he grunted. "Less you know about places like the South Stairwell or what went on in the West Wing basement, the better you sleep." He pushed off the shelf. "Stick to the charts. Follow Evie Thorne's rules. Last longer that way." His casual delivery didn't mask the genuine warning in his eyes. The asylum itself seemed to react to my probing. The subtle anomalies increased. Faint tapping sounds, rhythmic and deliberate, would follow me down specific corridors, only to cease when I stopped to listen. Lights would flicker more aggressively when I accessed certain archive terminals, and the cold spots became more frequent, more pronounced, particularly near the South Stairwell entrance and Elias Thorne's room. One quiet afternoon, needing extra linens, I found the service elevator predictably out of order. The only alternative was the South Stairwell down to the basement laundry. My stomach tightened, Rule 2 echoing in my mind. Maintain focus on destination landing. Do not vocalize step count. Do not vocalize step count. Taking a deep breath, I pushed open the heavy fire door and started down. The air in the stairwell was cold, still, smelling of damp concrete and something faintly metallic. My footsteps echoed loudly on the worn concrete steps. I deliberately kept my gaze fixed on the dim landing visible far below, forcing myself not to count. A surprisingly difficult task for a mind trained in meticulous observation and counting medication. Dosages. 1 flight down. 2 flights. 3, the landing grew closer. Everything seemed normal. My anxiety began to ease slightly. Just an old wives' tale, maybe. I reached the bottom. My foot descended for the final step onto the basement landing and met empty air. I stumbled, catching myself on the railing, heart leaping into my throat. I looked down. The landing wasn't level with the final step. There was an additional concrete step at the base, maybe 6 inches high, seamlessly integrated yet utterly wrong, making the transition to the basement floor uneven, tilted. It hadn't been there on my orientation tour with Matron Thorne. I was certain of it. Disorientation washed over me, a wave of vertigo. The geometry felt skewed, unnatural. The powerful, almost compulsive urge to quantify it, to say aloud, "Wait, that makes 13 steps, not 12, rose in my throat. Don't count it out loud. I bit my lip hard, focusing on the grimy basement door ahead, ignoring the spatial wrongness screaming at my senses. I deliberately, carefully, stepped over the phantom 13th step onto the solid concrete of the basement floor. My equilibrium felt instantly off, the corridor tilting slightly for a moment before settling. Nausea churned in my stomach. Quickly retrieving the linens from the laundry room down the hall, I forced myself back towards the stairwell, dreading the return journey. As I approached the base of the stairs, ready to ascend, I heard it clearly from the steps above me. The distinct sound of heavy work boots descending, one slow, deliberate step after another, coming down towards the landing. I froze, every muscle tensed. No one had followed me down. I was alone. The footsteps continued, steady, unhurried, echoing in the confined space. They reached the bottom landing, 12 steps, then paused. A moment of absolute silence. Then, one final, heavy step sounded, precisely where the phantom 13th step had been, followed by silence again. I didn't wait, didn't look up. I turned and fled back down the basement corridor, taking the long way around to a different stairwell. The sound of that impossible final step echoing in my mind. Back in the relative safety of the Ward C nursing station, shaken but trying to appear calm, I pulled out the drawing Elias had made. The distorted maze. I looked at it again, tracing the lines. My blood ran cold. The spiral seemed to have 13 distinct turns leading to the blacked out center, and one corridor branching off it looked disturbingly like the layout of the South Stairwell on the older Asylum blueprints I'd glimpsed. Connections, they were everywhere. The rules, the patients, the building itself. Elias wasn't just delusional. He was sensitive to the Asylum's fractured reality, perhaps even mapping it. And the number 13. My shift ended documented on the 3rd floor, but the events of the day, the encounter on the stairs, left me deeply unsettled. I needed to check something. Before leaving, I quickly accessed the central staff scheduling system, looking ahead to the following week. My name, my shifts, standard rotation. Until Friday, Cole, L, N shift location. Nursing station, floor 3, next shift start. Floor 4, records overflow. Floor 4, the unutilized wing. The place Rule 3 warned about. It wasn't just a random displacement anymore. I was being scheduled there. Seeing Floor 4 officially printed on my schedule felt like a deliberate escalation, a tightening of the net. Was it Matron Thorne testing me, or the Asylum itself manipulating the schedules, drawing me towards the acknowledged zone of wrongness? Frank just shrugged when I showed him, muttering something about clerical errors and never volunteering for overtime up there. His casual dismissal felt forced, his eyes holding a flicker of fear he couldn't quite hide. The week leading up to that Friday shift was agonizing. Every creak of the building, every flicker of the lights, every moment of radio static felt like a prelude. My research became frantic. What was the 4th floor? Officially, it was closed in the late 70s after budget cuts and consolidation. Unofficial records, fragmented patient testimonials, found in obscure online mental health archives, spoke of it differently. Whispers of experimental therapies gone wrong, of a ward chief, Dr. Alistair Blackwood, the name again, obsessed with psychic resonance, of patients becoming unmoored, of staff refusing to go near there even before it was officially closed. It sounded like a place where Ridgeway's deepest secrets, and perhaps its core anomaly, resided. And Rule 3, don't take the elevator down. Walk. Don't blink. Why not the elevator? Prone to malfunction during the variance. Or did it go somewhere else? And the blinking. Why was that specific biological necessity forbidden? What watched in those moments of darkness? What gained purchase when your perception momentarily reset? Friday arrived, gray and drizzling, matching my mood. My shift on the third floor was tense, uneventful, the calm before the storm. I performed my duties robotically, acutely aware of the clock ticking towards shift end, towards the inevitable displacement. I found myself timing my blinks, a ridiculous, paranoid exercise. Shift change. I meticulously completed my charting at the third floor nursing station. Signed out. Noted the time. Said goodnight to the incoming nurse. Gathered my bag. My heart pounded. I walked down the familiar third floor corridor towards the central elevator bank, consciously deciding not to preemptively take the stairs, needing to see if the displacement was real, unavoidable. I pressed the elevator down button. Waited. The soft mechanical sigh of the arriving car sounded normal. The doors slid open onto an empty car. I stepped inside, pressed G for ground floor. The doors slid shut. The car began to move. Upwards. My stomach plummeted. The indicator light above the door, which should have shown 3, flickered, then settled clearly on 4. It wasn't perception. It wasn't disorientation. The elevator itself had registered, or been forced to, the wrong starting point. Panic flared. Cold and immediate. Rule 3, don't take the elevator down. I jammed the door open button frantically. The car shuddered to a halt between floors. Then, with a low groaning sound, the doors scraped open halfway, revealing not a hallway, but darkness and the rough texture of the concrete elevator shaft between floors. Trapped. No, don't take the elevator down. It didn't say I couldn't get out. Heart hammering. I pried the doors open wider, squeezed through the gap, and dropped heavily onto the floor of the 4th floor landing. The doors scraped shut behind me. I was here. The 4th floor was silent. Utterly silent. Thick dust coated everything, disturbed only by my own footprints. Emergency lights cast a dim, unreliable glow down long, empty corridors lined with peeling paint and doors bolted shut. The air was freezing cold, stagnant, smelling of dust, mildew, and something else. A faint, sharp chemical odor, like old formaldehyde or preservation fluid. Rule 3 again. Walk down. Don't blink. My eyes were already starting to burn from staring. In the nearest stairwell. Okay. North stairwell was closest according to the floor plan etched in my memory. I started walking, footsteps echoing unnervingly loud in the dead quiet. Each intersection, each shadowed doorway felt like an ambush point, and I forced myself not to blink. The effort was agony. My eyes streamed, blurring my vision. Every instinct screamed for that momentary relief, that reset. But the rule felt absolute. Don't blink. Don't blink. As I walked, forcing my eyes open, the peripheral vision became strange. Shadows seemed to lengthen and contract unnaturally. Shapes flitted just beyond focus. Tall, thin shapes, like the figure I'd seen at Hayes's cabin. Focus, Liam. Focus, Liam. Faint whispers, like dry leaves skittering across concrete, seemed to emanate from the walls themselves, always seeming to come from just behind me, or around the next corner. A soft dragging sound, perhaps cloth on dusty floor, echoed intermittently from one of the bolted rooms I passed. Was it real, or just my strained eyes and overwrought mind playing tricks in the dim light and oppressive silence? I couldn't know. Couldn't risk looking directly. Couldn't risk blinking. Down the first flight of stairs. Eyes burning, tears streaming freely now. Keep moving. Keep staring straight ahead. Second flight, the whispers seemed closer, coalescing almost into words, promising rest, promising answers. If I just close my eyes for a second, I focused on the image of Elias's terrified face, on the memory of my Uncle David, on the need to get out, to understand. Third flight, almost there. The dragging sound seemed louder now, closer behind me on the stairs. I stumbled, almost lost my balance, squeezed my eyes shut involuntarily for a fraction of a second. Darkness, a flash of impossible geometry, the feeling of immense cold pressure, the overpowering smell of ozone and decay. Then opened them again, gasping, finding myself still on the stairs, heart pounding. What was that? Had something tried to manifest in that split second of darkness? Ground floor. Finally, I burst through the stairwell door into the brightly lit main lobby, collapsing against the wall, blinking rapidly, tears flowing, lungs heaving. The lobby was blessedly normal. A security guard looked up, startled, from his desk. The clock on the wall showed the correct time. The Rule 3 variance was over. I had survived, but the terror, the forced vigilance, the glimpse of something. When I blinked, it left me deeply shaken, convinced now more than ever that the asylum wasn't just haunted. It was actively hostile, its rules a desperate, barely functional system, against in chaos. And I knew with chilling certainty where I had to go next. Elias knew. The Windowless Room held the answers. My shift was over, but my real work at Ridgeway was just beginning. I had to find that room, even if it meant breaking every rule. The resolution settled within me, cold and heavy as dread, but shot with purpose, hiding, following the rules blindly. It was just managing the symptoms, perpetuating the cycle that had likely consumed Carson, that was slowly consuming Elias, that would eventually consume me, the Windowless Room. Elias's terrified whispers, Matron Thorne's rigid avoidance, the very first rule hammered into me. It pulsed at the dark heart of Ridgeway's sickness. Finding it felt less like a choice and more like an inevitability. Elias was the key. I waited, watching him closely over the next shifts, enduring Frank's cynical barbs about my special interest in 307. Then, during a quiet pre-dawn hour, his eyes cleared again. He looked at me, not with panic this time, but with a weary, almost pleading lucidity. "Nurse," he whispered, his voice dry, papery. "The drawing, you kept it?" I nodded, my heart quickening. "The count is wrong," he murmured, eyes darting towards the corridor. "Always has been. 13th step. It opens the way if you don't name it." He meant counting it, I realized. But the door. His gaze unfocused slightly, behind the iron lung. Basement archives, where they kept the water charts. His breath hitched. Steam. Must silence the steam first. Valve 13, then the wall. Listens differently. His eyes clouded over again, the connection broken, leaving me with fragmented, cryptic instructions. Valve 13. Silence the steam. Behind the hydrotherapy charts in the basement archives, it was more than I dared hope for. That night, near the end of my shift, I made my move, finding a need for old patient files. I descended into the basement archives, bypassing the South Stairwell, using the colder, less used service stairs at the far end of the building. The air down here was thick with the damp, earthy smell of old concrete, and something else, a faint, unpleasant metallic odor. Emergency lights cast pools of weak, buzzing light onto rows upon rows of forgotten metal shelving, groaning under the weight of decaying cardboard boxes. Following Elias's fragmented directions, I navigated towards the oldest section, near the foundations where the original hydrotherapy suites had been located according to the aged blueprints I'd studied. Behind a stack of collapsing boxes labeled Hydrotherapy Logs, 1940s, I found it. A section of damp, crumbling brick wall that felt subtly colder than the surrounding stone. And low down, almost hidden by grime, was Elias' symbol, scratched faintly into a brick. Nearby, embedded in the wall, was a series of old, rusted pipes, remnants of the hydrotherapy system. One large valve handle, painted red, bore a faded stenciled number. 13. Silence the steam, heart pounding. I gripped the cold metal wheel and turned it counterclockwise with considerable effort. A low, groaning sound echoed from deep within the pipes, followed by a final definitive thud as the valve seated shut. The faint hissing sound I hadn't consciously noticed before abruptly ceased. Now, the wall listens differently. Now, the wall listens differently. I turned back to the cold section of brickwork, pressing my hands flat against it. It felt hollow somehow, and vibrating with a low, almost subsonic frequency that resonated in my bones. As I pressed, a low scraping sound emanated from within the wall, and a rectangular section, perfectly aligned with the brickwork, began to slide inwards, revealing not a room, but utter darkness beyond. And the whispers started, faint at first and swelling, a chorus of disembodied voices sighing, weeping, whispering fragments related to fear, loss, confusion, echoing from the darkness. So cold. Can't remember. The water. Make it stop. Listening. It was the raw psychic static of the Asylum given voice. Rule 1. The trigger phrase wasn't needed. The room itself was the subject. Sedate. Impossible. Withdraw? Too late. I took a deep, steadying breath, remembering my purpose, my promise to Uncle David, my duty to Elias. I stepped through the opening. It wasn't a room in any conventional sense. Utter darkness swallowed my flashlight beam just feet ahead. The air was freezing, thick, making it hard to breathe. There were no discernible walls, only the oppressive feeling of immense, enclosed space, and the cacophony of despairing whispers swirling around me like phantom currents. This wasn't architecture. It was psychic geography, the raw, unshielded core of Ridgeway's accumulated suffering. It reacted to my presence. The whispers intensified, focusing, coalescing. Images flashed behind my eyes. Brief, agonizing glimpses of past patients' trauma. The cold shock of hydrotherapy, the confusion of electroshock, the terror of restraints, the bleakness of decades lost within these walls. Then, it turned personal. The image of my Uncle David, fading in his hospital bed, his eyes pleading. The memory of the Tanner Creek call. David Rennick's final scream. No, wrong memory. The memory of my family members' desperate decline. The feeling of my own helplessness. The entity, the room, whatever it was, clawed through my memories, seeking my deepest wounds, my guilt. It expected me to break, to run, to succumb to the despair it radiated. But my nursing instinct, the core of why I came here, took over. This wasn't an enemy to fight. It was a patient in unimaginable collective agony. I hear you, I said aloud, my voice trembling but clear, projecting calm I didn't feel into the oppressive darkness. I hear your pain. All of you. All of you. The whispers faltered for a moment, surprise rippling through the psychic noise. The visual flashes lessened slightly. "You're trapped here," I continued, speaking slowly, evenly, using the grounding techniques I used with agitated patients. Lost, hurting, remembering the fear. I focused on the core emotion beneath the chaos, the profound loneliness, the feeling of being unheard. "But you are not alone right now. I am here. I am listening." I didn't offer false hope or platitudes, just acknowledgement, validation, bearing witness. The reaction was not immediate healing, but a subtle shift. The chaotic psychic screaming didn't stop, but its focus seemed to turn inward, the despair becoming less aggressive, more sorrowful, the intense cold lessened by a fraction. The overwhelming pressure eased, almost imperceptibly. It felt like speaking calmly to a patient in the midst of a terrifying panic attack. Not stopping the attack, but providing an anchor, a moment of connection that lessened its destructive force. I stood there in the darkness, breathing steadily, focusing on projecting empathy, acknowledging the suffering without being consumed by it. It took a tremendous toll, draining my energy, leaving me feeling scoured from the inside out. But I held my ground. After what felt like an eternity, the overwhelming psychic pressure began to recede further. The cacophony of whispers softened, separating back into individual threads of faint, sorrowful murmuring. The intense cold became just cold. The room still felt vast, ancient, and deeply wounded, but the active, aggressive manifestation had subsided, quieted by the unexpected response of empathy instead of fear or suppression. I knew, with profound certainty, that I was now linked to this place, to the asylum's core wound. I could feel it as a low, constant hum in the back of my mind, a quiet echo of the collective pain, drained, shaking, but somehow whole. I turned and stepped back through the hidden doorway, pulling the heavy brick panel shut behind me. The scraping sound as it closed felt different this time, less like closing a crypt, more like closing a patient's file after a long, difficult, but necessary session. Okay, here are the final two chapters, Chapter 6, Falling Action, and Chapter 7, Resolution, completing the story of Liam Carter in Ridgeway State Hospital, incorporating all feedback and the chosen ending path. Chapter 6, The Tuning. Stepping back through the hidden doorway into the dusty, stale air of the basement archive felt like returning from another dimension. The oppressive psychic weight, the swirling whispers of the windowless room receded, but didn't vanish entirely. It left an echo, a low, persistent hum, resonating just beneath my hearing, a constant awareness of the vast reservoir of suffering I had just communed with. My body felt scoured, utterly drained, yet strangely calm. The frantic edge of fear was gone, replaced by a profound, bone-deep weariness and the chilling certainty of connection. I slid the brick panel shut. The scraping sound of stone on stone seemed normal now, mundane after the formless horror within. I leaned against the cold wall, taking slow, deep breaths, trying to process. I hadn't defeated anything. I hadn't cleansed anything. Not really. I had simply listened, acknowledged, offered empathy instead of sedation. And somehow, that act of witnessing had stabilized the storm, at least for now. But it had also forged a link. As I made my way back up through the asylum's echoing corridors, the building felt subtly different. Quieter, perhaps. Or maybe it was just my perception that had shifted. Patients I passed seemed calmer. The usual background hum of anxiety slightly lessened. Or was I imagining it? Frank Kowalski saw me emerge from the basement stairwell access door. A route rarely used, he stopped pushing his cleaning cart, his eyes widening almost imperceptibly as he took in my pale face, my exhaustion, the strange stillness about me. He didn't offer a cynical joke this time. He just swallowed hard, made a barely audible warding gesture with his hand, a quick crossing motion, and pushed his cart rapidly away in the opposite direction. The protesting squeal of its wheels unusually loud in the corridor. He knew, or sensed, that I had crossed some line he religiously avoided. Matron Evelyn Thorne was waiting for me outside the Ward C nursing station, arms crossed, her expression unreadable, but her posture radiating tension. She didn't need to ask where I'd been. Her sharp eyes missed nothing. "Nurse Carter," she said, her voice low, tight. "My office now." The walk was silent, tense. Inside her sterile office, she closed the door firmly behind us. "Report," she commanded, her voice colder than the room I just left. "How much to say?" I stuck to partial truths, focusing on the trigger. Elias Thorne provided information during a lucid phase. I began, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. "You investigated a level 0 restricted area based on the ramblings of a catatonic schizophrenic," she challenged, though her eyes held a flicker of something else. Not just anger, but perhaps fear. "He wasn't rambling, Matron," I said quietly. "He was describing the source. The psychic repository. The windowless room." Evelyn flinched almost imperceptibly. She sank slowly into her chair, her professional mask cracking slightly, revealing the deep weariness beneath. "You went in?" she whispered, horrified. "Yes, and you're still here, still coherent?" Disbelief warred with dread on her face. "I didn't use force," I explained slowly, feeling my way. "I didn't try to suppress it. I listened, acknowledged the distress, offered nursing care, I suppose." She stared at me aghast. "Nursing care? For that? Carter? Do you have any idea what you've done?" She leaned forward, voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "That room isn't a room. It's the accumulated psychic trauma of this entire institution, possibly anchored by whatever horrors Blackwood and his predecessors performed down there. Rule 1, the sedation. It wasn't just to protect staff from the patients mentioning it. It was to protect us all from the patients agitating it, from drawing its attention. Every time someone connects with it, it grows stronger, more aware. It felt calmer, I countered softly. After I listened, calmer. She laughed, a short, harsh, broken sound. "Or just focused on you." She shook her head, looking at me with something akin to pity. "Staff have gone in there before. Doctors with theories, orderlies on dares, nurses like you thinking they could help. They came out broken, catatonic, or didn't come out at all. You interacted with it, Carter, formed a connection. You might feel calm now, but you're linked, tuned in. It knows you. You're carrying its resonance." Her words confirmed the low hum I felt in my mind. The connection was real, irreversible. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. Evelyn sighed, the sound infinitely weary. Now you're a liability, and possibly our only hope." She looked older than ever. "I maintain the protocols because they are the only known method, however flawed, to keep that thing stable, contained. But you did something different, something impossible." She paused. "You will report only to me regarding any further resonances you feel. You will continue your duties, but I will assign you specific patients. Those most sensitive, those closest to mentioning. Maybe your connection can act as a buffer. Maybe." Her expression was grim. "Or maybe you'll just be the first one it fully consumes. Either way, Nurse Carter, you can't leave Ridgeway now. You're part of its system in a way no rulebook covers." I walked out of her office into the sterile corridor. the matron's grim prognosis echoing with a low hum in my mind. She was right. I couldn't leave. Not anymore. My idealistic quest to help had led me to become bound to the very heart of the asylum's suffering. I checked on Elias later. He was sleeping soundly, truly sleeping, for the first time since I'd arrived. His face in repose looked peaceful, almost young. Perhaps I had helped him at least. But the cost was now mine to bear, alone. Time takes on a different quality within Ridgeway's walls, measured less by clocks and more by the ebb and flow of collective anxiety, the cycles of medication, the phases of the moon that seem to subtly agitate the building's wounded psyche. 8 months, maybe a year, passed since I entered the Windowless Room. My life found a new, strange rhythm, dictated by the low, constant hum of psychic residue in my mind, and the careful management of its echoes in others. Matron Thorne, true to her word, began assigning me specific patients, not the violent or overtly psychotic, but the quiet ones, the listeners, the ones whose charts noted acute sensitivity to environment, auditory hallucinations referencing institutional memory, or simply fixation on absence. These were the patients who, like Elias before his final piece, were perilously close to resonating with, or being drawn into, the asylum's dark core. My approach was unlike any standard nursing practice. When young Amelia in room 214 began whispering about the empty place behind the walls, I didn't reach for the haldol. I sat with her, grounded myself, and focused on the cold hum within me, projecting a sense of calm acknowledgement, a quiet mental shh. I didn't engage her words, didn't validate the delusion verbally, but met the underlying psychic frequency with its opposite, stillness, empathy directed not at her words, but at the fear beneath them, the fear I now understood intimately. Slowly, her agitation would subside, her eyes would clear, the connection momentarily broken or soothed by my intervention. It was draining, terrifying work, leaving me feeling scoured raw afterwards, but it worked in a way sedation never could. I became the ward's unofficial psychic shock absorber. The other rules still applied, but my understanding deepened. The extra step on the South Stairwell, Rule 2, felt like a localized temporal ripple, more pronounced when the room's energy was agitated. I learned to sense its presence before I reached the landing, choosing alternate routes or simply stepping over it with careful, silent acknowledgement. The 4th floor displacement, Rule 3, occurred twice more. The walk down without blinking remained harrowing, the peripheral whispers and shadows still clawing at my senses. But the reason felt clearer now. Blinking broke focus, opened you to the displaced energy, allowed the asylum's fractured reality to imprint itself. My unwavering gaze was a shield, maintained at great cost. Frank watched me with a mixture of fear and awe now, leaving offerings of lukewarm coffee outside my door some mornings. Vance maintained her professional distance, but her observation reports noted decreased Alpha-7 sedation events on my shifts. My life outside Ridgeway ceased to exist. The connection to the room, to the collective suffering, made the noise and chaos of the normal world unbearable, meaningless. This asylum, this burden, was my entire reality now. My idealism had died, replaced by a weary, pragmatic, and profoundly lonely sense of duty. I wasn't healing the asylum, merely tending its deepest wound, keeping it from consuming others as it had slowly, irrevocably consumed me. Tonight, the air is heavy. A new admission young man named Samuel is struggling badly, whispering frantically about a room with no windows, scratching symbols onto the wall. Symbols disturbingly similar to Elias Thorne's drawing. Matron Thorne looks exhausted when I come on shift. He's close to it, Carter, she murmurs, handing me his chart. Be careful. I enter Samuel's room. He shrinks back, eyes wide with terror, whispering about the listening walls. I don't reach for the syringe. I pull up a chair, sit quietly beside his bed, close my eyes, breathe slowly, and reach out with my mind towards the familiar cold hum at the core of Ridgeway. I feel the room's vast, ancient pain, its loneliness. I don't fight it. I acknowledge it, and then carefully, gently, I project a single focused thought into that psychic wellspring, not of suppression, but of shared stillness. Quiet now, rest. In the room, Samuel slowly stops whispering. His frantic energy subsides. His breathing evens out, deepening into what might almost be peaceful sleep. I feel the familiar psychic drain, the weight settling heavier on my own soul, but also the faint lessening of the asylum's background thrum. I sit there, watching Samuel sleep, a solitary caretaker in the heart of the storm. The asylum breathes around me, its pain a constant presence. My work is never done. The final sound isn't a dramatic chime or a closing door. It is simply the quiet, steady rhythm of the patient's breathing. A fragile sound, a temporary peace bought at a cost only I now fully understand. I am the listener. I am the buffer. I am the caretaker of the Windowless Room. If you felt the chill of Ridgeway's silence, if the 13th step made your breath catch, or if you now fear what watches when you blink, hit like, share this story with someone who sleeps too soundly, and subscribe to Night Creepypasta Rules. We break the silence, one rule at a time.